I gave a talk in May, the Gill lecture, and one of the points I raised when I was there is that it troubles me if we start to talk about places in terms of whether it will work for Instagram versus a real place, you know? And I was here, there, and that's a real place. Anybody know where that is? That's New Orleans immediately after Katrina. And that's 180,000 units lost through a failure of engineered infrastructure. Just remember, it wasn't this hurricane that caused the failure, it was the failure of the levees. And I was there, that's a real place, and it was inhabited by real people. And what happened is, you can see this is, I was there from 2005 to 2010. I started working there a couple of months after the storm. You couldn't actually get there, but I started to get engaged there, and then I eventually moved. And this, you can see the debris is still being accumulated on the streets. And what happened there was that people started locally to resist the suggestion from outsiders to be told what their place should be or should become. In fact, what people said is, just a second, we're attached to this place, and we are going to be engaged in how it actually recovers. I said to somebody at the back that, you know, New Orleans after a couple of years realized, one of them said to me, you know, we thought for a couple of years that the cavalry was coming, that someone was coming to help us, and then we realized, no, actually we were the ones that we were waiting for. And so that became the sort of mantra of the resilience of these folks. And why I want to talk about why place matters, I know we have architects here. There's too many people here with good pairs of glasses. And so I know there are architects among us. And there are probably some engineers, and there are surely some planners. And I think that the key thing we have to remember here is that we sadly do all sorts of stupid things to compromise place. And to me, this sign pretty much sizes it up. That's the bridge to the Lower Nine. And when I saw that in New Orleans, I thought, well, the place was basically, or glad we're not live streaming, the place was basically fucked. Because you couldn't walk into those communities. And you couldn't walk in and you couldn't walk out because of signs like this, which is a terrible fail in terms of how we actually design our places. Now, this is a completely different iconic place. Where's this? Anybody know? You know. Say that that's Fogo Island. And that is an extraordinary natural landscape place, as you can see, and it's now been matched with an extraordinary human-designed place, the Fogo Island Inn. Two iconic, a natural iconic structure and then a human-made iconic structure, reinforcing the importance of place and how it grounds us and how it defines and helps us understand ourselves, gives us a sense of belonging and attachment. And I'm a fellow with the foundation that is the beneficiary of all the social businesses that are being created on Fogo, and they're creating interesting models there to be used across different communities. Not replicated, not everybody wants an inn like this. I always say to Zita Cobb, the founder of Fogo Island, I always say that the Fogo Island Inn is Canada's High Line. New York City has a High Line. I was in New York City for 5 years, and people would come and say, we want to build a High Line. And we would always say, oh, no, you don't. You don't. Nobody's going to create the same thing, right? You can't just take these things and do another one. But this is an iconic example of what you can do when you embrace the strength of a place. Okay, I'll keep my quiz going. Anybody know where this is? It's not St. John's, it's not Canada. Close. Somebody guessed Bogota. You've got the right country, wrong city. This is Medellin, Colombia. And this is the top of Comuna 13, which was a very low-income slum development, people would have called. And if you get most Colombian cities, but particularly Medellin, there's a valley where all the commercial activity is, and then people live up the hill. And the dilemma that these communities had is that they had no way to get down and back up. And so people would stay and were quite isolated. You couldn't get to school, you couldn't get to work. And so planners, interesting intervention, planners in conjunction with the community and with a really smart mayor, put these escalators in, which looked like this. This is me at the World Urban Forum a couple of years ago, and I was initially so skeptical. I thought, really, what are you doing putting an escalator in a community? But what it did is it created a sense of connection, and it meant that all of a sudden people could go to work, they could go to school, because they could get from their community down. These were paths, and they were highly compromised, and so they didn't go the escalators. And they also did this. They created these gondolas. Now these are quite iconic and famous, And what I want us to try to understand in Canada is that we shouldn't be afraid of these kinds of solutions that come from the global south, and they come out of a circumstance that's challenging, but why don't we do this? Why aren't we, this is very cheap, these are relatively cheap compared to a subway or an LRT. These are, sorry, I was going to see how long I could go without mentioning those three letters. These do create a kind of connectivity, and in Medellin, at the junction where you pick up the funicular, where you pick up that gondola, they put the library. So you can get a book. It's fantastic. You're waiting, you get a book, you get on the gondola, you get a chance to read the book. And when I took these different transportation modes in Medellin, I was struck by who I was with. I was with kids in school uniforms, I was with business people, I was with seniors, and they were going to work, they were going to shop, they were doing all sorts of things, and they were picking up a book at the library. Like, how smart is that? So if you think of one of the principles we're trying to create in urban environments, and in rural, frankly, is we're trying to create the kind of connective tissue that we see in nature everywhere. Once you see these patterns, you can't not see them. You know, that could be a bus transit line. That could be all sorts of ways in which an ecosystem connects with itself to communicate and be able to evolve and iterate. And so these kinds of natural patterns are the kinds of things we need to learn from. This is another one from Fogo that Zita Cobb uses. She's saying a community like Fogo Island is like a floret in a global economy of a cauliflower. And that kind of notion of how do we actually recreate different forms of connective tissue so that we as a whole can survive and thrive. So if you think of place and the natural assets you've got, whether it's New Orleans, whether it's Vancouver, whether it's Medellin, whether it's Fogo Island, or whether it's Ottawa, and you add to it the people that are actually been raised in those environments and live there and thrive there, and together you see we intersect the natural environment, the built environment, and the people, and then we create what really is culture. That is what culture is. You can't have one without the other. There's lots and lots of very smart discourse about this, and I'm sure we have an academic in the room who will be able to cite it during the question periods about whether place or people are more fundamental to culture. I'm not a complete spatial determinist, but I do believe that the environments, the physical environments in which we function, have a bearing on our values and have a bearing on the kinds of people we become. And so to me, this nexus, this awkwardly drawn by me, diagram of the intersection between place and people is what we have to be focusing on, and what this institution would focus on. I always put this up because these are the people in New Orleans that I worked with. So I was there for those 5 years, and I basically, for the first year, shut up and listened and tried to hear what the local folks were actually observing. So the top left, homemaker, had not worked, thrust into an environment because her whole neighborhood flooded. She ended up creating a bunch of neighborhood centers, first time initially in her garage. She ended up trying to create kind of network of folks to be able to do mutual aid. Middle one, Karen, artist, never had a computer in her hand, don't forget this is 2005, became a huge documenter of all the heritage assets in New Orleans that were being neglected and basically allowed to fall apart. Obviously a priest on the right, the Vietnamese community in New Orleans, very tight community, Catholic, was able to revive itself through the strong connections that it established through faith. Bottom left, Pam Broom, also had been an artist, New Orleans had lots of them, became a gardener, started focusing on the food system, creating different kinds of approaches to growing their own food because they recognized in New Orleans that they had to strengthen local capacity in the local economy there because they were not going to be able to depend on a larger environment. Pam DeShield, the middle woman, activist on environmental sustainability, and on the right, Timlin Sands, who created a network of neighborhood partnerships. Again, because they had to do it themselves. They had to dig down and find the resources themselves. And these were all people that I ended up supporting, and I ended up working for National Foundation that was able to put resources to them, and then they flourished. I always put this one up just to remind people just how indelible culture is. I left New Orleans 5 years there, and then I moved to New York. Within a few years of being in New York, another storm happened. It did not follow me. And this was Hurricane Sandy, and again, we saw the same kind of thing happen. Where the communities that were hardest hit really had to dig down to be able to revive their culture and figure out what was it in them that was going to connect them to one another. And this kind of stubborn kind of, look who we are. Is anybody here, have you talked to a Staten Islander? They want to secede. They're sort of New York's kind of rump group, and they believe that they're exceptional, which they are, and that's what carried them through their recovery. For some reason on this slide, strange, why? Although I was with someone last night who said that her nephew doesn't call it community, he calls it co-mutiny, which has a nice ring to it, actually, co-mutiny. But this